So sure, you need to use your VHF radio to call for bridge openings or other things. But is it really important to leave it on when you have things like Facebook at your disposal? Hi, I'm Nika Waters, and welcome to the Boat Galley podcast. Today I'm talking about the importance of the VHF radio. There are three main ways we use it, and I really think you should too. Today's episode of the Boat Galley podcast is sponsored by Sailrite. Today's episode of the Boat Galley podcast is sponsored by Sailrite, your one-stop shop for all your DIY canvas and upholstery projects. From heavy-duty portable sewing machines to fabric, foam, and everything in between, Sailrite's outstanding customer support and free how-to videos empower you to sew for your boat, your home, and more. Visit sailrite.com to get started on your DIY journey. When we talked about the fact that we were going cruising again, friends said, "Oh, you definitely have to make sure that you're on Facebook and get on the Facebook groups for the different places that you're going. That's where you're going to find the latest and greatest and most up-to-date information that possibly exists for a place." Well, imagine my surprise when I went onto a Facebook group when I was in St. Martin, and I found this post. "If you're in Marigot Bay, the boat SVXXX is dragging." Facebook definitely has its place as a resource. Well, sometimes. Their search engine possibilities make it extremely difficult, particularly if you're using it on a phone. But it does not take the place of the VHF radio. And that post, which I did see when we were in St. Martin, was a prime example. People log onto Facebook at random times of the day. The algorithm shifts what's seen by whom and where they're shown it and when they see it. Looking at the comments on this particular post, it's clear that most people who saw it fell into two camps. Though they were in the St. Martin Facebook group, they were nowhere near Marigot Bay, or they saw it, as in our case, 3 days after the boat went onto the rocks. It's not necessarily a given that putting a call out on the VHF would have saved this vessel, but it is a reality that the timeliness of a message like that was critical. And no, there was no corresponding call going out on the VHF at the same time. The VHF, which is a very high-frequency radio, uses line of sight to transmit, meaning that your radio antennae, the two boats talking to each other, need to be able to see each other to effectively communicate. In very practical terms, this means that it's very local usage. If you call on the VHF about something happening in Marigot Bay, the boats that are going to hear you are in Marigot Bay or close enough to be able to hear it. You need harbor information, you call on the VHF. You lose your dinghy and you need eyeballs looking for it, the VHF is your friend. The VHF is an important piece of safety gear on board. It's also a fabulous source of information, entertainment, and support. And one big difference between cruising this time around and even when we were out with the kids 10 years ago is that way too many cruisers don't seem to be using their VHF at all. And it's to their detriment, as well as to that of the larger community. There are, of course, a few protocols to follow, and the main one being that 16 is for hailing in distress only. And there might be a special hailing in distress frequency in your particular area, and you need to figure out what that is. But what that means is you make contact and you move to a different channel, period. It doesn't even matter if you've got something really short that you want to talk to people about. Don't continue the conversation on 16 or that hailing channel. The Boat Galley has a very comprehensive course on using the VHF, but if you feel pretty confident and you just want a quick reference to have on board for maybe guests or that sort of thing, there's an excellent laminated sheet that you can keep by the radio. I'll put a link in the show notes to the Boat Galley and those courses, but an incredible resource, of course, as for many things. So how do we use the VHF? Definitely we use it for information. Up-to-date, specific, timely information is at your fingertips with the VHF. Hey, what's happening with the bridges in St. Martin? You call on the VHF, you get what's happening right then and there. Some harbors wind up running a morning radio net specifically to talk about welcomes, goodbyes, business announcements, and local events. You can find out so much about where you are, if there's a radio net, by listening to that net. Calling on the VHF, I need local information. This is Calypso. And somebody will get back to you, and then you move off this channel and ask those specific questions. Things like customs hours or check-in procedures. That will get you what's actually real right at that time. We also use the VHF for entertainment. We love reading the mail, which is following along when boats that we know or just think the voices sound cool, or maybe we've heard them talking and we want to just follow along with what's going on when they're chatting. There have been some pretty memorable conversations we've eavesdropped on, but remember that the VHF isn't a private message. Even if you have some prearranged secret switching channel, people will find it. And you know what? If you say switch or go secret, that just means people are going to be more interested in finding where your secret channel is anyway. So don't think that anything you say on the VHF is private. For that reason, don't advertise that you're going out to dinner or leaving your boat for weeks or whatever. Or, hey, I just got a whole lot of brand new cash and it's on board in my boat. Don't do that sort of thing on the VHF because it's not a private conversation. And support. The true reason for the VHF is support. If you need weather, you can get that. In the States, you can get it from the Coast Guard. Even down here in the Caribbean, we've heard the French Coast Guard will get on twice a day and say, if you want weather, granted you have to speak French to be able to follow along, if you want a bridge to open, you call them on the VHF. If you have an emergency at sea or in the harbor, you call on the VHF. Thank goodness most calls don't fall into the emergency category, but when they do, it's a sobering reminder of things going wrong. If you had an emergency, wouldn't you want people listening and being in a position to help you? So definitely use 16 or whatever the local hailing channel is and keep it on. You might be able to help a fellow cruiser, or you could be the one needing help. Contrast that first example of, let me put this out on Facebook and say there's a boat dragging and people don't see it and the boat went up on the rocks. There's a picture on my blog of the boat hauled out in the boatyard with a nice big hole in the side of it. Contrast that to this. If anybody knows the people from vessel XXX anchored near the Witch's Tit, can you please contact them and let them know their boat is dragging? That was a message broadcast on VHF 10, which is the hailing channel in St. Martin. Within 10 minutes, there were a couple of dinghies at the boat, helping secure it while the owner was located and the boat could be relocated. I've got no idea how long it would have taken for a Facebook post to be effective. Use your VHF. It's a really great communications tool. I can't wait to share an anchorage with you when we've dinghied over to each other's boats to invite each other over for sundowners, and we've got the VHF going in the background just in case something happens and we can help somebody. Thank you so much for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. We love hearing from our listeners. We love it when people share us with your friends. We love making boat life better at the Boat Galley, and we sure hope that this has helped in some way, shape, or form. Have a fantastic week.